The rain had started hours ago, drumming steadily against the roof of Halcyon Motors' massive industrial complex. The kind of rain that felt endless and uninvited, leaking through old vents and pooling near forgotten crates in the corners of the underground garage. The facility, with its sleek upper levels full of polished glass, lab coats, and spotless showrooms, barely acknowledged the existence of this basement level, a world beneath the spotlight where machines coughed oil instead of humming quietly, and where people like Liam Parker lived in silence, grease on their skin and untapped brilliance buried deep behind tired eyes. Liam, 28, was no stranger to being invisible. His coveralls had been the same for nearly 3 years, marked by hundreds of spills, tears, and burns, each a story no one ever asked about. He wasn't part of the innovation team or the strategic design department. No, Liam was just another blue-collar fixture in the background, a tool in someone else's machine, expected to shut up, show up, and fix whatever broke. But tonight was different, and he felt it before he even saw it. Like gravity had subtly shifted, like something ancient and mechanical had exhaled for the first time in decades. He'd been on his way out, backpack slung over one shoulder, headphones dangling around his neck, when the corner of the garage caught his eye. Not the usual cluttered tool racks or engine parts, but something hidden behind a thick canvas sheet, corner marked off with a yellowed sign, Prototype Zone, Level 4, Access Only. Most people ignored that space out of habit or fear, or both, but Liam paused, heart tapping faster. He'd heard whispers about a legendary project buried down here after its spectacular failure. Something called the Model X, a hybrid engine said to be too complex, too ambitious, too unstable to ever reach production. Rumor had it the engine melted itself during its first live test, and after swallowing millions in R&D budget and tarnishing several big names, the company shelved it in shame. Liam hadn't seen it in person until now. With a glance over his shoulder, he stepped past the warning sign and peeled back the dusty canvas like an archaeologist unearthing a relic. What lay beneath was unlike anything he'd seen, a frame built from sleek experimental alloys. The engine housing compact yet strangely aggressive in shape, tubes coiled in odd, beautiful patterns like arteries made of chrome. Walked away, intimidated, but not Liam. His hands itched just looking at it. He popped the hood. Instantly, he saw chaos. The engine wasn't just broken, it had been misunderstood from the start. Thermal relays showed signs of heat failure, but the cooling system hadn't even been optimized. Wires ran tight like a violin string, strain marks evident near the coupling. Corrosion had set into a key junction where nanofluidic cooling lines should have been sealed. Liam's mind raced not in fear, but with hunger. No manual, no just him and the machine, and the storm outside echoing the storm in his chest. He grabbed a toolbox without thinking, slid gloves over his stained hands, and got to work. It began with disassembly, removing rusted bolts, clearing debris, examining every part like a surgeon. Most engineers looked at engines like math problems. Liam looked at them like music. There was rhythm in the pressure cycles, melody in the combustion pattern, harmony in the I-assisted modulation. And this engine, it was trying to sing, but someone had stuffed cotton in its throat. He worked with intensity, but not panic, each move deliberate. Sparks flew once when he rerouted a sensor line and temporarily overloaded a capacitor. He didn't flinch, just gritted his teeth and kept moving. An hour in, he discovered that one of the AI nodes had been mounted in reverse. Polarity, no wonder, it kept frying itself. 2 hours in, he had replaced the core thermal coupler with a custom hybrid one he'd been tinkering with on his own time. A part no one approved, no one funded, and no one believed in except him. 3 hours in, he rewired the main feedback loop, aligned the balance rotor manually using nothing but a flashlight and his own steady eye, and modified the airflow gate to allow for dynamic pressure changes on the fly. Somewhere along the way, his shirt tore at the shoulder and blood mixed with oil on his wrist, but he didn't notice. All that existed was this machine, this impossible, discarded thing, and the quiet promise he made to himself that if he could bring it back to life, maybe he wouldn't feel like a ghost in this building anymore. By the time the clock on the wall clicked past 3 a.m., the storm had calmed, but inside the garage, everything was charged, like lightning had buried itself in the walls. Liam stood over the machine, chest heaving. He stared at the ignition switch. Mounted on the test rig, a flickering green light pulsing next to it, waiting. He hesitated. What if he failed? What if it exploded? What if security rushed in and dragged him out before he could explain? But another thought crept in louder. What if it worked? He reached out, thumb trembling, and pressed the button. The engine coughed, a low guttural sound like a bear waking from hibernation. Lights blinked red, then amber, then green. RPMs climbed, pressure stabilized, cooling system engaged. For a moment, Liam thought he was hallucinating, but the numbers didn't lie. There were no errors, no overheating, no misfires, just a pure, clean, rhythmic hum that echoed across the garage like a symphony. No one had ever played right until now. It was alive. He stepped back, stunned, sweat soaking his collar. He didn't smile, didn't celebrate. He just stared, the moment too big for emotion. That's when he heard the floor creak behind him, subtle step, almost respectful. Turned, slowly, and saw a man standing in the shadows near the exit. Tall, still wearing the same kind of jumpsuit as the other garage techs. But something about him was off. His hands were too clean, his boots too polished, his posture too confident. The man stepped closer into the light, revealing a face too symmetrical to belong in this grimy underworld. Liam frowned. The man looked familiar, but something wasn't right. The gray wig on his head sat oddly, as if placed with care but not comfort. And then, with a casual flick of his hand, the man reached up and pulled it off. Beneath it was a face Liam had seen 1,000 times on posters, magazine covers, keynote videos, and company-wide emails. Miles Strathmore, the founder, the legend, the billionaire, the ghost CEO who hadn't been seen in public at the company for nearly a year, and now he was here, in the garage, dressed like a janitor, staring at Liam like a man who just found a diamond in a pile of coal. Strathmore grinned slowly, his eyes scanning the engine behind Liam, then returning to meet his eye. "Even know what you just did?" he asked, voice calm but edged with something electric. Liam's mouth was dry. "Fixed it," he said simply. Strathmore took another step forward, now fully illuminated under the harsh overhead lights, and for the first time in years, Liam felt seen not as a cog. Not as background noise, but as someone who had done something no one else could. The machine purred behind him. The air smelled of ozone and metal and adrenaline, and the garage wince, a place of routine and silence, was now a cathedral to the impossible, where a mechanic had just rewritten the limits of what was broken and what could still be built. Liam stood frozen, the hum of the engine behind him feeling almost distant now, like it belonged to another world, another time, though it had come to life just moments ago by his own hands, his bleeding, oil-slicked, trembling hands. Yet, none of that seemed real now compared to the fact that standing just a few feet away was Miles Strathmore, the ghost-like figure behind the Halcyon Motors empire, the man whose very name made executives sit up straighter and investors salivate. And here he was, smiling with disarming calm, a gray wig dangling from one hand and a spark of genuine curiosity. In his eyes, the kind that made Liam's skin crawl with disbelief, because nothing about this situation made sense, and yet every second that ticked by said it was completely, terrifyingly real. The silence between them wasn't awkward, it was electric. Charged with the unspoken knowledge that some kind of cosmic scale had just tipped in the darkness. Some invisible door that had been locked for years had creaked open ever so slightly, and Liam, the forgotten mechanic, had accidentally or maybe fatefully walked through it. Strathmore took a few steps forward, eyes flicking between Liam and the engine with a kind of reverence usually reserved for art or miracles. Then nodded once, as if to himself, before speaking again, this time softer, more deliberate. "Do you know how long this engine sat here?" Liam shook his head, unsure if his voice would work, so the billionaire continued, 6 months. It broke the day it started. We ran simulations, built AI tuning scripts, flew in consultants from Japan, Germany, even a Nobel Prize candidate from Sweden. And all of them looked at it, nodded like geniuses, and told me the same thing. It can't be fixed. And yet, you did. Liam swallowed hard, voice scratchy from hours of silence and disbelief. "I didn't mean to go behind anyone's back. I just saw something." Strathmore smiled wider. You didn't go behind anyone's back. You went beyond their vision. He turned to the engine and tapped one of the panels lightly. You see this? He asked, motioning toward a thin, rerouted cable Liam had replaced. This small thing, this was all it took. Not 10,000 simulations. Not a month-long symposium. Just a man who actually knows how to listen to machines instead of looking at them like puzzles or ego boosts. Liam's heart pounded harder, unsure if this was praise or some kind of setup. But Strathmore's tone shifted from admiration to something more intense, like he'd been waiting a long time to say what came next. I built this company because I wanted to challenge the limits of technology, of people, of thinking, but somewhere along the way, the thinkers stopped building, and the builders were buried under the thinkers. We turned into a factory for forecasts and credentials. We stopped noticing people like you. Liam lowered his eyes, not out of shame, but because that hit too close, like someone had read a diary he never wrote. I tried, Liam said quietly. I submitted ideas, emailed suggestions, even gave a few redesigns to my manager once. They said it wasn't my lane, so I stopped trying. Strathmore stepped closer, now only feet away. That's my failure. I let this place become something I don't even recognize anymore, which is why I came back. Not as a CEO, not as a name behind a curtain, but as a pair of eyes, boots on the ground, undercover. I needed to see if we still had fire in this building or just ashes. Liam looked up, finally meeting his eyes, the truth beginning to land with heavy weight. So, the coffee machine? The broken lathe motor? Last month? Strathmore chuckled. All me, not very well, mind you. But I got the job done. Liam blinked, mind spinning at the image of the billionaire CEO fixing busted kitchen appliances in a disguise just to observe people like him. That's insane, Liam muttered. No, Strathmore replied, voice calm. That's how you find truth. And the truth is this tonight. You did what this company couldn't. You solved the problem no one else could. And you didn't just fix an engine. You resurrected a vision. You lit the match again. He reached into the pocket of his coveralls and pulled out a small tablet sleek, matte black, clearly encrypted, and tapped it twice. A soft beep echoed, and somewhere far above, access logs and command protocols quietly shifted. As of now, you're no longer a garage mechanic, Strathmore said. You're head of experimental engineering, reporting directly to me. Full authority. No red tape. Liam staggered slightly, feeling the floor tilt beneath him, blood rushing back into limbs that had gone numb. I don't know if I can do that, he said, voice cracking. I don't have credentials. I've never even managed a team. You're the only person who made this work. Strathmore cut in firmly. That's all the credential I need. Liam's hands twitched, still aching from hours of work, still smeared with the evidence of what he'd done. But what if it was just luck? He whispered. What if I can't do it again? Strathmore leaned in slightly, voice dropping, to something almost fatherly. Then you fail. And you learn. And you try again. You know what the top engineers did when the Model X failed? They blamed the system. You know what you did? You looked at the machine and said, talk to me. That's leadership, Liam. That's engineering. The storm outside had softened to a drizzle now, and inside the garage, the engine still hummed a steady, clean sound that almost felt like breath. Liam looked at it, then at the man beside him, still in the fake jumpsuit, still holding a wig, but suddenly looking more real than anyone Liam had ever met. So what happens now? He asked. Now? Strathmore repeated, stepping toward the garage doors. Now we go upstairs. We walk into that elevator, and you meet the people who used to ignore you, and you walk past them, and you start building a team. One that thinks like you, listens like you, builds like you. Liam hesitated, eyes scanning the garage like a man saying goodbye to a version of himself. Then he nodded, slowly, and followed. As they crossed the garage together, side by side, security cameras rotated to track them, and for the first time, no one would question why the man with grease on his face walked with the man worth billions. They stepped into the industrial elevator, and as the doors closed behind them, Liam caught his reflection in the steel panel, dirty, tired, bleeding, but also standing straighter. Something lit behind his eyes that hadn't been there in years. Strathmore stood beside him in silence for most of the ride, then finally said, You know, if you'd waited for permission, we wouldn't be here right now. Liam smiled faintly. I guess broken things don't wait. The elevator dinged. The doors opened to a floor Liam had only heard about in meetings, the executive level, where everything gleamed, where decisions were made and lives were changed. As they walked through the glass corridor, staff turned, froze, confused at first, then stunned, a man in a jumpsuit with grime on his hands, and next to him, the reclusive CEO of Halcyon Motors, walking like a man who had just found something worth believing in again. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. Liam was no longer invisible, no longer an overlooked name buried in maintenance logs. He was the man who did the impossible, the man who listened when others only talked, the man who fixed what was broken and changed everything.